most of you have heard about the Flint water crisis, but it's not the only issue with water happening in the state of Michigan. Cadillac, Michigan, they're having a major problem, and many of you probably haven't heard of it unless you're in Cadillac. And then even those there, I may not have. Bill Barnett, you're a citizen, you live in the area. You're going to talk about this. You put a lot of work into this. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you, Dave, and appreciate your work too. As your journalist stuff is wonderful to follow, and it's been helpful to a lot of people, and hopefully this helps people as well.
Okay, so I'm going to put up a map. That's Michigan right there. A lot of water. We're surrounded by a lot of water. Zoom into Cadillac. It's a small community. How many people live in this area? What's the population?
The same number that's been in place probably since the 1930s or so, 10,000. Our townships
Wow.
have grown tremendously, but not the city. It's kind of maxed out number wise. It just hasn't had the growth overall that the city would like to have, which is if you're not growing, you're dying, is what a lot of cities say. I don't really agree with that, but that our goal has been always to grow and have better city, better community.
Yeah. You served as the mayor there as well. What years?
I was on the city council from 95 to 1999 inclusive. I was the county commissioner from 2000 to 2007. 2007 to 13, I served as Cadillac's mayor for 6 years.
Wow. Okay. When did it first come? Well, there is an issue with the groundwater. Is that, and I want to make it clear right away, we're not talking about the city of Cadillac's water supply, right? The public water system. We're not talking about that.
That's true. They have found two locations to put wells in that are PFAS free and that have been good water sources. They moved wells that were over by the industrial park, which was scary because the PFAS was really up on top and no one knew that. And they had deep wells, but at some point the wells aged out and it was time to get out of that neck of the woods. So they moved them. Those have been good. And that's there's a lead concern. There's a lead concern in every city. A federal letter went out. We have 400 homes getting looked at for that. But for the very most part, the 3,600 people on the water system, the municipal water system, are not in harm's way.
Okay, now the map is up here. That's Cadillac. Right here, there's an airport, and you said, is it to the right of here, the east? Where I'm circling, I don't know if you can see it. Is that around there where an industrial park was years ago?
No, it's a little, if you see the lake, it's just north of the lake. And a little north right there. Yep, right in that area is our industrial park. And
Okay.
there's homes to the north of that. There's an airport to the north of it. I say north because all this time, we had two Superfund sites in the 1980s that got resolved in early 1990 with
Okay.
all the properties that you're looking at right there that look like industry. They all got together and they paid a tax to set up a pump and filter system to bring what they had, other chemicals, TCE, and other things that they were working on to get out of the groundwater so it didn't migrate and hurt people. That system's been going on for 27 years and it was not made for PFAS. But when it came time to kind of shut down the wells and move forward, the federal government now is on to PFAS and has been since like 2014 or 15, right after I left. I was never told about it as when I was the mayor or had any clue. I was told that our system's working, it's reducing levels, there's no people on wells, it's successful. Come to find out, thankfully, the EPA wanted to have more testing for PFAS. Our city blocked that in 2020. It caused the state of Michigan, which is Eagle, to go sort of behind their backs, but they have state monitoring wells over there, and they took two tests, one in 21 and 22, both tested positive for PFAS. All this stuff's coming out, going into the Clam River, potentially migrating areas, and what nobody expected. And it really looks bad because they didn't come out in 2021, the state or the city, to tell us, hey, we have PFAS down there, and this might want to be, might deserve a proactive look. And it didn't get that because that information was never made public. I had to FOIA that from Eagle
Wow.
and expose this. It's just a private citizen who read about PFAS, joined the state PFAS committee, which is called CAWG, CAWG, which is part of MPART, which is an arm of Eagle. Anyway, it's just kind of a hobby. I enjoy reading it and studying it. And the last thing I ever expected is that it would be in our town. But I had hunches because on the other side of town, where they've been dumping all this into the river, it showed up at a school a mile away from the Clam River. And homes across that, from across the street tested positive. Baker College tested positive. An entire Horseshoe neighborhood tested positive over there. Yet, still, I can't get the Eagle Group to look at that. They have their hands full.
So when you say they tested, was it the EPA that, what governmental agency basically they confirmed that it is their PFAS contamination?
That it was over this odd spot miles away from the industry was Eagle.
Eagle.
Formerly DEQ. They're basically these state regulators. They try to do a good job, and they're just overwhelmed by PFAS in the state. And now they have at least 30 workers working on the city of Cadillac, 30 deep right now, trying to figure this out to help the EPA. There were 2 Superfund sites, so the EPA is in charge, and the EPA did the right thing to try to test for PFAS before these wells were pumping wells, and the filter system were at least partially shut down. I wrote a letter to the governor. I asked Eagle to look into this, and they just came out of nowhere and said, we're sending 70 letters out to homeowners. We think you have a valid point. And they checked into it. And the tests that have been coming back, 50% above federal criteria, 80 to 90% of the wells have some level of PFAS in it. And it's not as bad if you look at Michigan's levels, but those are going hopefully to change to the federal numbers. In any event, 1 out of 2 wells that they tested had toxic, poisonous chemicals, and they've just looked into PFAS so far. And we can't get pipes to these people fast enough. There's bottled water going on. Our mayor's been under fire. Our city manager has been under fire from citizens. Our mayor of 11 years resigned last night out of the blue.
So it's let me stop. So it's a fact. It's a fact. PFAS have contaminated the groundwater in Cadillac. That's a fact.
It's vast. It's over blocks and blocks. And I never knew people had a well. A person that served with me for 16 years on the council he served, he never heard of it. I have a hunch our staff didn't share it with the mayor until I came forward last June.
What are PFAS that you know of them? I know they always say it's a forever chemical, increased risk of certain cancers, but it's a chemical that was used in manufacturing.
Yeah, it was in the plating companies for chrome, and because it would stop and suppress fumes from coming up and hurting the workers. But back then, every company was just terrible with their chemicals. They would throw them right out the back door. It wasn't just Kaiser or Northern Air. It's just these guys had the worst chemical, and it doesn't. It's got a lot of carbon connections to it that don't break down. People have had their blood tested. They're 1,400% above where they should be. A gal that lives a mile away from this on the other direction, going directly to Lake Cadillac. And Lake Cadillac has it. Lake Mitchell, we have these 2 lakes, a canal that's in Ripley's, believe it or not, because it never freezes between the 2 lakes. We have just a beautiful, gorgeous community, but it's in our lakes, it's in our fish, and we're being told it didn't come from this direction, that it's just there kind of naturally and doing what other lakes do. But they're a block away from this lake testing right now, and enough people have responded. My goal, I was working with the EPA very closely. I met with them. They came in a special meeting with me because I was the one that came up on this. It's caused me great anxiety and stress since then. But I did, I think, the right thing by figuring this out and talked to Eagle and the state of Michigan to test, and they did. They did a wonderful thing, and they've opened up what nobody knew was going on for almost 50 years. People have been drinking this, and the sad part is I know people that have died in this area that had cancer. They had similar things. Their joints are having problems. They bloat. They end up dying of pneumonia and heart failure, and those people have red dots on their houses now on the heat map. So it's just very scary, and bumps on people, lumps. Just it's it's starting to add up. We need a health study. We need the state and the federal government to step in. And I'm worried about other cities all through our state that could easily have the same thing. There was a breakdown at every level, health department, Eagle, DEQ, and mostly, I mean, the EPA was on top of this, but all this stuff migrated outside the zone of these properties. And no one knows for sure where it came from, but we have dangerous levels of PFAS in many homes. And my position is, hey, folks, if you have a well in that neck of the woods, stop drinking your water. Stop right now. Assume that you have it in there and get yourself hooked up. We have 150 homes that can hook up. And then, of course, the city came out and said, we're going to do an ordinance, and everybody's paying up to $5,000 to hook up their own. People
to the water, to the city water, to the city water.
Yes, 150 are easy hookups. Other ones are out in islands. It's almost like you should condemn the houses versus try to get them clean water.
So so there's been people who have probably already passed away from so forth. So where do we go from here? What needs to be done? I mean, do we have so the state, the federal? In your world, what would be a perfect, I mean, there's no perfect solution, I guess, but what does need to be done?
Well, I'm not convinced filters are working because they are only so good, but there's filters that are on water for the people we can't get it to. They're already designing pipes for streets that don't have it. 150 hookups are real easy. There's another 50 that are possible. There's 25 homes basically or so that some of them are in the next township. So we have a township problem in the city and the township don't get along. That's not moving forward. These people are stranded and they're very close to the city, but still far away from pipes. So the first thing is get the municipal water, and we need state and federal money to pay for hookups. We have a lot of blue collar people in this town. It's an industrial town. This is what comes along with that. But all these people should not have been on wells. So we need a health study for people's blood, blood serum. We need to study all these wells and get them all tested to see where it's coming from, who's responsible for this. I mean, these are companies that are still responsible, but the city tried to fix this. They put themselves in harm's way by being a good Samaritan 27 years ago, and in my opinion, mishandled this by covering up, at least for the last 5 years, possibly 7 or more, the fact that it was in there, and it's number one going into our Clam River, but also was close by wells that they should have gone to and shut down by an ordinance they passed in 2018, and people were never warned. No warning, no information provided, no chance to know what was going on. So
they need complete transparency. Yeah. Is there complete transparency now, or is it still suffering?
It's terrible because they just, I was begging them, tell us what happened. A lot of citizens, was a whole group of citizens that actually wanted the mayor to resign and the city manager to step down. I didn't really want to see that right now. I wanted to see them stay because we have a crisis right now. We need all hands on deck. But they had a big presentation at their last meeting where the utilities director stood up and said, here's the thing. And then the city manager took over and says, you might have noticed we've left 6 years out. 6 years. Well, that was from 2018 when they passed an ordinance and should have told everybody to shut down. I mean, I was looking for how did this vocational center on the other side of town get PFAS for 5 years? And the group I was working with, the Eagle and Ampart, did testing, didn't share it with me because it was technically below the Michigan levels, but I'm trying to everywhere, every stone I could look under, I was trying to find out where this was. I was reading it. I've been on this committee for 5 years, and it wasn't expressed to me or to anybody in the community that it was down there. That would have opened up, I think, testing in wider spaces. I talked a guy into testing that lived in the middle of the industrial area, and I found out he was still using a well with his family, and he was assured it was fine. And it took me months to talk him into it because that's a crazy thing to come up and ask somebody. And he tested it. He came forward. He warned everybody. His name's JT Anderson. He was a hero because he was the one that allowed the testing that this would be proved. He did it at my urging, and others followed through. And then Eagle stepped up, wrote 70 letters to homes that they thought were in harm's way, and they were exactly right. But this thing
Well,
got.
the city. Sorry to interrupt. I want to. The city. I'm looking at their web. I think it's a website right now. They have an actual. So I mean, PFAS resources. So
Yep.
it's
This was it was like pulling teeth to get them to admit there's a problem. I went for 3 months last summer begging them to go over and test the guy's house, and they sat there looking at me. They would not do it. They won't admit how long they knew about it, and they have tamped this whole thing down. It's a non-issue, and my whole goal was to get people, please test your wells. This is serious. That was my first goal, and to get that out there and to have the state help. Whatever the solution is, we need a unified community solution. We need to address this with our legislators. There's already talks going on with that to get money from the state. They helped Kent County. They did a health study down there, and we need financial help up here to get these people hooked up and to either weave them away from this poison that's under a third of our city. And the sad part is, Dave, it's come to our south part of our town too. Now is affected, so it's at the north and south. And
is that the map? What I have on the screen right here, is this what you were talking about? The little dot.
Yeah, it is. And all those yellow dots half of those would be red if you use the federal system. The state hasn't formally passed those. They're going to this summer. But the federal system would make all those yellows, at least half of them. And then they've expanded. If you could show the bottom part with the green box, that's right next to our lake. That's the next place they're going. I mean, they're right next to Lake Cadillac, but they feel the lake isn't affected by this. The experts say that, but they also said it was all going north, which is straight up and to the right or to the left. And they ruled out 30 years ago that it was going south right into those neighborhoods that are heavily congested. And lo and behold, hundreds of people have wells right there that are in harm's way and had no clue. It was just an oversight for many years. And once it was figured out, nobody came forward.
So a lot of these companies, they're probably not even in existence anymore. So, right? I mean, there's no compensation on their part. They're free and clear? Are they just out of business?
Well, it's kind of better if it's an orphan site. I mean, the number one suspect was Northern Air Plating and Kaiser that were the two Superfund sites. There's a couple other companies. I'm not going to mention them, but our city attorney did at a meeting that he said they're suspects as well. Those companies are here, and the companies that took over for Northern Air and Kaiser had to sign on for obligation if anything came up. And oh my gosh, here it is. So this is not good for them, and probably not fair that this is a new company there. But there are some there, and others have gone away, aren't existing anymore. So there's a huge problem of holding anyone responsible directly.
But it sounds like immediately there needs to be, like when Flint water crisis happened in the state of Michigan, that was a whole fiasco. But it sounds like action needs to be taken immediately, because you're talking about, blood tests and all this sort of thing, and that costs money. And I'm assuming there's not a lot of state or federal money going towards this.
Nothing. And these people actually need mental health counseling. They're getting phone calls. Don't drink your water from the health department. Don't drink your water. Don't cook with it. Don't brush your teeth with it. And don't give it to your pets. Those are the phone calls people are getting. They even had accusations of death threats against the mayor, and I think the mayor and a council member or the city manager and his family. That they're not real clear. The attorney general took it over. There's been no charges. About a week ago, the mayor put a target on my back, came into a meeting and claimed that the city knew about PFAS since 2010. 8 days later, she's apologizing. She didn't apologize. I don't need her to, but she corrected her statement, and was very unfair to me because she was trying to share the blame or switch the blame to my back while there's death threats on her. I didn't appreciate that, but she has cleared that up, at least partially. And then the next day she resigned. But there's a lot of community pressure on her to do better. And she's just one of the council members. There's 4 other ones that have been sitting there. It's a divided board. Our city manager's contract's been up since last summer, and they haven't dealt with that, didn't do an evaluation. There's been several mistakes made. to compound this and the tension in our community, which has been at the the highest levels. We need a solution, a unified community solution. They need more testing to figure out, is there a source? How do we deal with this? And they're just not done testing. Our pump and filter group stopped doing testing for 3 years. The EPA let them. They were very lax. They have new people in there, some younger folks that are very competent are looking at this. And, we've got all hands on deck now, but it took almost a year to get the city to acknowledge that there's a problem.